Hello, everybody. Today I have two chess games that I want to go over with you. One of them is from this YouTube channel I like, Outright Ignite, and then after that I have a treat for you. Here are my credentials, and let's get right into it.
So the game begins pretty normal. We just take up the center, develop pieces, 3 months off, still don't know openings.
He plays the Scotch here, and the opponent makes a mistake with d6, which our hero immediately punishes with d5, which is a very good move. I actually did not find this move when I was reviewing the game before I used the engine, but d5 is by far the best move in this position. And it immediately punishes d6 because you're now going to have a space advantage on the queen side, and black is going to have trouble defending this queen side. So knight c to e7, obviously, and you're going to notice something, which is that for the next several moves, the engine is going to love c4. It's just going to want to attack on the queen side because that's where you have this 0.7 advantage.
We push a pawn up, preventing his bishop from coming down and pinning the knight, and he does the same.
Our hero instead plays h3, which is a fairly nonsensical move. A lot of new players really are terrified of bishop pins against their knights. And the reason that this is nonsensical to play h3 is that you're really not afraid of this bishop pin, because this bishop is one of the only things defending this queen side. There is this idea in this position at any point of playing bishop b5 check, and because this pawn is here, defending by pushing c6 is going to be a little bit difficult, and you can mount pressure against that. And this bishop is necessary to defend this diagonal, because obviously you're not going to defend with the queen, and knight here is a little bit suspicious, to say the least. So this bishop is important where it is. Let's say that you play c4, which is obviously the correct move, bishop pinning your knight, and then you just play a developing move like knight b3, and black takes. Taking back with the queen or the pawn, actually surprisingly, are fairly equal. The reason for that is because if you take back with the pawn, you're giving your queen access here in the future. Even though you double up your pawns, it doesn't particularly matter. So let's say here, and as you can see, you have a 1.2 advantage now, and this position for black is just very, very scary. So let's just say some normal moves like here, knight d7, top engine move. It's going to be very difficult for black to defend this position now. All that to say, h3 is a pretty nonsensical move. It is just a misunderstanding of the position, and it's not playing on the right side of the board. But, you know, in similar manner, black plays h6, which is even more nonsensical because, let's say, for example, like bishop here, if you play this pin, it's not a pin because black can just quite easily play this. And yeah, you're playing f6, you know, you don't want to play f6, but there's not really any danger of queen over here because you can always block it and that's defended by the knight. So this pin is really not scary. h6, again, is not addressing the needs of the position. So this is kind of a funny moment in the game where both white and black kind of agree, okay, we're not going to have any bishop pins in this game. Continuing on with the game, knight c3, obviously not a very good move because you're blocking your c-pawn. And this is not intuitive. This is not the most intuitive thing because, like, usually knight c3 is going to be a good square for the knight. But in this position, you can play c4 and then knight c3. And typically in queen's pawn openings, like where you go d4 at the start of the game, you are going to want to keep this in mind that you might want to play c4 before playing knight c3. And this is usually in queen pawn openings, which this opening was an e4 opening, a Scotch, but because black played this inaccuracy, it kind of looks more like a queen's pawn opening, and you're going to want to play on the queen side. So by playing knight c3, you're losing a lot of your advantage, and that's because you can no longer play c4. So if you want to play c4 at any point, which is what the position demands, you're going to need to go back here, which is not the greatest because after this, you're just going to have to go right back. So knight c3, not a very good move, but whatever, it's fine. c6, top engine move, can't complain about that. Trying to resolve some of the pressure on the queen side. Bishop out, nice developing move.
If he takes, we take back with the knight, attacking his knight, kind of forcing him to take it with his knight, or take back with his knight. We take back with the queen. You already know shit's about to go down. Honestly, we were afraid of him if we took back with his pawn, this square being available, and then having to move the knight somewhere. Still probably better just to take with the pawn. But it doesn't matter, this is what we do.
Takes, and white correctly recaptures with the knight. Now you might be thinking, why are you not recapturing with the pawn? And that's because this pawn right here is very important. This pawn prevents this. It sort of discourages that, but you know, it doesn't prevent it for sure. It makes this pawn a backwards pawn, which is that after this trade, recapturing with the queen, which is correct, this pawn can't really comfortably advance, and you're going to play c4 at some point maybe and clamp down on that further. And this is a weakness that you can attack later. And it's also correct that it is preventing black from playing e4 themselves. So even though queen takes does allow a developing move with tempo, which is typically not what you want to be doing, it is the correct move. So good spot by white. This is actually a good time for white to play this bishop b5 check move that we've been keeping in the back of our minds since basically the beginning of the game. And that's because bishop blocks hangs this pawn. And you might be thinking, what about this this pin, this skewer rather? And after this, there's this check, so you are fine. And then you are attacking this pawn. And if knight blocks, it just relieves the attack against your queen, and your pieces are well placed. So actually the top engine move here for black is king e7, which, you know, it reattacks the queen, but it just does not look that great. Your king is now permanently in danger. But instead, white backs off with queen b3, which does give away a lot of advantage, but it is, you know, preventing this bishop from moving, kind of, because if it moves, it's hanging this pawn. So, you know, fairly okay move. And you might be thinking, after queen b3, isn't this pawn just hanging? And the answer is no, because of this fork, you know? And black loses their knight, so pretty clever trap by white. I don't think white saw it. I also don't think black saw it, but, you know, benefit of the doubt. And this b6 move by black is not a good move because it re-allows this. It also allows this with a double attack against here with check. So this is just not a good situation. You know, after this, how are you going to defend this pawn? It is kind of difficult to do so. There's queen c7, in which case you just castle and you continue attacking. You have your rook already on this opening file, and this is just a very nice position for white. So b6 does not really do much. I mean, you are gonna, I guess, fianchetto the bishop, but again, your bishop is useful at controlling this, and white can basically trade off your bishop whenever they want to. Queen a4 check is not good because you allow black to develop their bishop, counterattack your queen, and defend their king for free. It should be noted that in this position, after you allow black to defend their diagonal to the king, this pawn now actually is hanging. After this pawn isn't defended anymore. Except it is. What? Because of that? This is a pretty nasty check. You probably don't want to allow this. So queen here. You have this move, which is a fork of the rook and the knight, which is absurd. So it's a good thing that black didn't notice that this pawn was hanging. And then after this maneuver, which is hilarious, this is not good because black could have done this instead, which is definitely better. And in this position, you just don't really have an advantage anymore. Alright, so we have this dance here, and then white allows their bishop to be traded off because this is check, which, you know, is a fairly good reason.
So we just go ahead and castle to improve our position. I say that as I'm watching the eval bar go down. How the fuck is castling bad?
And white castles and loses a lot of the advantage. Now, white asks in their video, how is castling bad? And there's a couple reasons for this. Reason number one is that your king is not in any danger in the center, and there's more important things to worry about right now. So there's a lot of play going on in the queen side, and if you look at black's pieces, in this specific position, not in general, but in this position, Black does not have an easy way to attack your king. If you castle, Black now does have an easy way to attack your king with this move. And Stockfish is not going to really be scared of this move. The engine doesn't think this is a good move, but do you really want to be playing this position with white? This is scary. You know, all of the opponent's pieces are lined up to attack your king, it looks like. This is just not something that I would want to allow. And another reason is because castling queenside is just obviously superior. That's because you immediately get your rook onto this open file, which is, you know, X-ray, X-ray, X-ray attacking the queen. There's no pawn here. This pawn is a backward pawn, and all the play is on the queen side, and your king is pretty safe here. So castling queenside is obviously the better move. Castles kingside, takes with check, queen blocks, and at this point, it's kind of hard to tell what you should do here. For some reason, the engine likes this, voluntarily doubling up your pawns and controlling this square and controlling this square. You are threatening to take this because this is a pin to the rook.
So we just moved the queen to pretty much an inactive square.
You're also now cleanly hanging this pawn because you don't have this check anymore, forking the knight. But, you know, if takes, then takes, and you win this pawn. Just kidding, you don't. Queen c6. Brutal. It pins this, reattacks this, and it defends that. So, you know, be careful when you're doing stuff like this. And white goes c4, finally. You know, in the only position of this entire game so far in which c4 is a blunder. White could have gone c4 in like any position in the past 17 moves, except for this one. So c4, hanging the queen. Obviously, you've now lost the game, but don't resign, especially not at this elo rating. Let's go. b3, defending the pawn. Nice. Queen back for some reason. Absolutely absurd and ridiculous move. What are you even doing? I guess black is threatening to push this pawn now and attack on the king side, except black doesn't end up doing that, so, you know. Queen c8, blocking the rook. I don't understand this move at all, but it's not a blunder, so, you know, black's just playing very conservatively. Rook here, because it's on the same file as the queen, and maybe black will blunder this and not see the discovered attack. Honestly, what are you going to do? Rook c1, fairly good-looking move, so I don't have a problem with it, except now you are actually cleanly hanging your pawn, but whatever, that's been the case for a while. Knight here. Okay, putting your knight to the rim.
The idea is to go here, and then here, and then here, and fork the two. Give it back. Give me my motherfucking queen back.
I've got to say, that is very good planning. You notice that the king and the queen are on a fork square, on a knight fork square. So if you can play this check, you will be winning back the queen, and maybe you can stay in the game. Honestly, excellent thinking, except the plan doesn't work at all, because this square is defended twice, right? Additionally, you can't even go here because the queen controls this, and also, if black moves either the king or the queen at any point, it doesn't work anymore. So what would need to happen for this plan to work is that black would need to play non-move. You go here, and then you go here, I guess, and then black plays another non-move, and then you go here, and then black plays... I can't even make non-moves anymore because they're all doing something because black's up a queen. Sure, this. And then you go here, you know, because you're threatening rook takes, because after bishop takes, you have this knight fork. Because there's no other way to really get rid of the bishop except for sacrificing your rook. And then black plays another non-move, you know, for like the 5th move in a row. You play rook takes, and at this point, black does not have to take your rook, but let's say they do anyway, because, you know, you're not threatening anything if they don't take the rook. Takes, check, take, go over here, then takes. Boom. After all of that, you're now still down 5 points of material because you traded a rook and a knight for a bishop and a queen. And you were previously down an entire queen for nothing, so you're now down, well, now it's 4 points of material, but you've lost a lot of the pieces you can use to attack. Now you just have a bishop and a rook. So this is actually a fairly easy position for black to win. So there's about 100 different reasons why this plan doesn't work, but you are down an entire queen, so you have to do something. You know, it beats resigning, so it's a pretty good plan in my book. And for some reason, black goes here. Absolutely ridiculous and absurd move, because e4 is a pretty good place for the knight to be. White can't kick it out easily. Let's say after f3, you can even just like go here and cement your knight here, and things are going to be very difficult for white. Why would you voluntarily, without like, you know, unprompted, just play knight back and relieve some of the tension off of white's position? You're up a queen, you need to attack. What is this? I mean, you don't need to attack, but it would be nice because you're up a queen. Rook to the half-open file. Nice positional play. Maybe in 100 moves you'll win this pawn. Well done. Okay, bishop out, preparing to castle, which is a good idea, because you might as well get this rook into the game, and, you know, if white is preparing things against your king, which they kind of have to do, castling defends against that. So, good move. Knight here. Okay, hanging the knight, let's go. Black miraculously sees it, I wasn't expecting that. And now plays g4 out of spite, you know, maybe black will have pre-moved castles and will hang their queen. You're kind of forcing the queen to an annoying position in which you can easily get checkmated, nicely done. Black wasn't going to do it themselves because black doesn't want to play active chess at all. Okay, giving away the pawn because why not? Okay, giving away another pawn, because why not?
Just trying to break something up, because we're kind of throwing. We're a little bit angry.
I guess white is thinking maybe they'll get some rook activity over here, except you don't have enough pieces to do that. And also, now black can castle, which they should have done like 2 moves ago, and bring a rook over here and forcibly trade off one of your rooks. But again, you're down a queen, you don't have anything. And white has this plan. And the plan goes as such, and they actually carry it out. Takes, here, blocks, takes. And now you're threatening this bishop, and if black goes like here or something, then you'll take the bishop and then the rook. So, you know, very nice plan. Except, again, it doesn't work at all. Reason number 1 it doesn't work is because black doesn't have to take this bishop. You know, they could just castle in this position. I think that's the second top engine move. Oh, it's the third, actually. But even if everything goes the way that you wanted, and black doesn't play knight d7, which completely stops your plan, which they did actually play. Let's say, yeah, sure, this. After this, it's now mate, because your rook is stuck in this corner, and this queen and this knight and this rook are now just going to harass your king. So that's not good. And if you take like this, by the way, now your other rook is counterattacked. And by the way, here, I should mention, instead of like castling or playing knight here or whatever, you can actually play this as black. And this move looks ridiculous. It looks kind of gimmicky, but the more you look at it, you're going to see that white just has nothing in this position and they just lose the game. And obviously, like, if takes, this is a fork, and you lose this rook, and you just have a rook left, so it's not good. But the other idea behind this is that you're actually always threatening this mate in 2 idea. This means that white can't go for this idea, because they can never take the rook, because taking the rook is not with check. So let's say, for example, takes here, they can't play this, because if they do, that's, you know, checkmate. However, in this position, if they don't take the rook, well, then you're just going to take one of the rooks. So that means that back here, white can't take the bishop at all, and white has to defend this pawn. Essentially, the best moves for white are going to be rook d2, rook c2, or taking here and allowing this fork. And essentially what this means is that white can't go for their plan anymore. They have to be defensive, and as black, you're just going to steamroll them, and they have nothing, and it's game over. And by the way, rook takes a2 does accomplish the same exact thing because it threatens this checkmate in 2. So, checkmate. Also, black can easily just castle in this position. Not like that. Like this. And then takes. Yeah, you won a bishop out of the whole exchange. Out of this exchange, that is. But remember, you sacrificed your bishop from before, so you really just won a whole pawn. Congratulations. And now, like, black has successfully traded off one pair of rooks, and you just have one rook against everything. So this is not good for you. This one rook is not going to help you at all. And that plan just fell flat on its face. But, you know, knight here also does the trick. And I can't hate on this planning at all because it's a pretty, like, clever idea. It reveals that white has a lot of potential in chess, I think. And you got to do something because you don't have a queen. You're down 16 points in material, so you gotta play something. Rook back, defending this pawn, not a bad idea. Queen counterattacking your rook because obviously, you know, queen here was a bad square for the queen to be on. You know, it's too close to the king. What if the king goes up and takes your queen? You know, you have so many pieces. Look at all of black's pieces. They're all on the back 2 ranks. You are up 16 points of material and you're moving your queen back here? Why are you doing this? Dude, whatever white is doing on this side of the board doesn't matter. You can just castle and defend everything and just go ahead and checkmate white. But sure, I mean, it's not a blunder, so I can't really hate on this move. And then white goes back, and this is hilarious because this is actually blundering this skewer. You only have 2 rooks left. You're down 16 points of material, and you managed to find a way to lose even more material. And by the way, there's still that. So this move forcibly gets a rook off the board, but because black has an aversion to getting any of their pieces off of the first 2 ranks, you know, they go pawn here, which, again, not a terrible move. Takes. Again, this is still here. F4 for some reason.
I didn't notice, but F4 blunders the rook again, and that's because of this move, Queen E3 check. And the idea is after Rook F2, because the other king moves just lose the rook, Rook F2, you can take this rook. However, there's a more sadistic way to do it, which is that because white doesn't have any pieces left, you can just pile up pressure against this pinned rook, even though white can defend it with Rook F1. So you go Rook A2 here, threatening this, which is very, very nasty. Rook F1, and then Bishop B6, and there's nothing for white to do at all here. So let's say king here, I guess, or taking the pawn. Rook takes, queen takes, check, move here, and then just checkmate. And then white just gets brutally destroyed because they can't defend this rook, essentially. But, you know, that would require black to use their massive material advantage to actually attack their completely defenseless opponent, which black clearly does not want to do.
Castles, and it's funny because I was saying that black should have castled for the past however many moves, but I don't think castling is that good here. And that's because your king is now in more danger in this corner than it was in the middle. And that's because white only has these 2 rooks, and you have so many pieces around your king. These 2 rooks cannot do anything to you. I don't even think white can give you a check, and even if white does give you a check, you can just easily walk out of it. However, if you castle now you're giving white a clear plan of what to do with their pieces, which is not good because they didn't have anything. And yes, it's mate in 6, but let's say that you slip up as black, you have like a brain aneurysm or something, and you just allow white to play multiple moves in a row somehow. White can actually pose quite a good amount of danger to your king with this little maneuver if you allow them to, which, you know, you won't, but you could. And in this position, white could do basically whatever they wanted, and you would be completely safe. So I guess the point of castling is to bring this rook into the game, which black, spoiler alert, does not end up doing. But you could easily just, play king e7, and then that's just game over for white. They have nothing. Check. White blocks. And how do you not play this move as black? Like, a very obvious check gets the king in a lot of hot water. The king now has to sit in the corner, and you develop your bishop for free, and now you can move this rook as well. But I guess black doesn't want to play it, and instead takes a pawn, which, is fine. Okay. Again, prompting black to play this check move. But, this is so ridiculous. How on earth do you play queen d4 check instead of bishop b6 check? And how do you even not play queen e3 check? It's just closer to the king. Okay, so out of the 3 checks that you had, this is definitely the worst. White goes in the corner because what else are they going to do? Okay, taking a pawn because obviously that pawn was the most important thing in this position. Okay, attacking.
He almost has too many pieces. This is the type of endgame where I'm lame and just move all my pieces up here to the corner and just checkmate with the king and the rook.
Check blocks, and black just takes the rook, which... The problem with this is that you don't have an easy way to get the other rook. I would say, okay, if you could sacrifice this rook for this queen for this rook, and then trade the other pair of rooks, you should do it. But now you're kind of in a more complicated position than you had to be. And I don't think this was a good decision, especially when you had something so easy as this. You just keep it as close as possible, and at some point, white's just going to have to pin one of their rooks, and then you are going to have an easy way to attack it with this rook. That's what you do. And you only trade if the opponent's making it really annoying for you. Finally, black plays this check with this bishop.
And it's about this time that he sends me this friendly message that says, "Why are you still playing?" Oh, buddy, you can't break the fighting spirit. Let me tell you something.
Okay. Okay, and then this check with this rook. Good move. King up. Finally getting some rook activity. Okay, attacking the knight. Moving the knight here instead of this, because this would actually be an active square, and remember, black does not like activity. And white sees this brilliant idea, which unfortunately, again, it doesn't work, but the idea is rook check. And if black takes, then this is stalemate, actually, because the king can't go here, because the bishop's covering these squares, the knight's covering these squares, and the rook's covering these squares, so that actually is stalemate. And this is a really good idea, but it doesn't work, because you can't force black to take the rook. And black is going to keep running, and at some point, black is going to be able to take the rook with the knight, or the bishop, or even this pawn, but, you don't have any more checks. This check takes with the bishop, and that's just it. So you don't have anything. You have to take like this, and at this point, yeah, you're just down everything and you lose. But very good spot from white, this rook d8 check idea, and black does not see it and gets a stalemate. So never resign. Very good spot. Good job, white. Let's go.
All right, so let's do a quick game review. What happened? Essentially, we talked about a lot, but only 3 important things happened during that game, which is that white blundered the queen, white did not resign, and then black blundered stalemate. And black was employing this very popular strategy, which is that when you're winning, a lot of people like to just do nothing and wait for their opponent to resign. And a lot of the time it actually works, but this time the opponent did not resign. So black essentially did nothing for 20 moves, and white tried to pull off some plans to hopefully win back some material. And 2 of those plans did not work, but 1 of those plans did. And this should tell you that even when you're winning by a lot, or you're losing by a lot, you should still play the game of chess. You can't just relax and wait for your opponent to resign or do nothing. And chess is really a brutal game because I think it's pretty obvious that the person playing with the white pieces played a lot better than the person playing with the black pieces. Probably the person playing white is a better chess player. However, the second that you play c4 and blunder your queen, it doesn't matter anymore. And on the other side of that, the second that you play rook takes d8 and blunder stalemate, it doesn't matter that you were up like 17, 18 points of material anymore. You can play a ton of really great, really smart moves, but one or two blunders just completely derails the entire game. So we went over a lot. There was that c4 idea. We talked about when to and how to attack on the queen side, but if you only remember two things from this video, it should be never ever resign, and also try really hard not to blunder, because the other things that we talked about were very important. They're important concepts, but as you could see in this game, resigning and blundering are the most important. By the way, I didn't really show it much, but this was a 15-10 game, which means that both sides have 15 minutes each, and for each move that they make, they get 10 seconds back. And Black finished this game with 16 minutes and 18 seconds remaining, which is a ton. Why are you playing a time control that's really long if you're not going to use a lot of your time? Like, throughout this game, you could see the evaluation. Black had, like, mate in 5, mate in 6 for, like, 25 moves in a row. Mate in 6 is not easy to see, but if you have, like, 16 minutes left and you get 10 seconds back for every move, it's kind of not excusable. And maybe if Black had spent more of their time actually thinking, they would have played chess a little bit more actively and would have checkmated White sooner, and also would not have blundered stalemate. And since you're wondering, the move where White went c4 blundering their queen, yeah, White spent like 30 seconds on that move, so like, I don't know what to say about that, but you should spend your time. So I told you guys I had a treat for you. This entire video I've been so high and mighty, but this time I'm going to show you one of my games, and I am hiding the opponent's username because this is really embarrassing. Actually, this is so embarrassing. I don't even want to show my face right now. And I'm going to make a little game where see if you can guess our elo, because for now I've just put both of our elo as double question mark, which I do think is appropriate. So I am playing Black here, e4, c6, Caro-Kann defense. I do still play this, and by the time that I played this game, I had already been playing the Caro-Kann defense for a little bit. So d4, d5, we have an exchange, standard stuff, and for some reason he plays knight e5. Now, I've never seen this move before. I still don't understand what it is. The engine doesn't think it's bad somehow, even though this move just looks absurd to me. I've still never seen it in another game besides this. Maybe he's trying to play like the Blackburn-Schilling Gambit or something. For those of you who don't know, this is the Blackburn-Schilling Gambit trap. e4, e5, and White has to play an Italian opening, and then Black plays this dubious knight move, which, you know, is a mistake. It is +1 for White, but it does undefend this pawn, and the Blackburn-Schilling Gambit trap happens when White takes this pawn, which is a bad move because Black has this move, attacking the knight. White can save the knight by playing this move, which they were setting up. It does fork the queen and the rook, so it takes. However, that's a blunder because queen g5 did not only attack the knight, it also attacks this pawn. And there's really only one way for White to defend this rook, which is with rook here, after which you can play queen takes this pawn with check. White can either cover up the check with the queen, which hangs the queen to this knight, or White can play bishop back, which hangs checkmate, because the bishop is pinned. Fun fact, this is actually the first opening that I learned in chess at all. And this opening, by the way, sucks. Nobody ever falls for that. But all that to say, maybe that's what White thought was happening by playing this really strange-looking move. Apparently, I knew what was happening. because this knight move undefends this pawn, right? No, it doesn't, because there's a queen here. Queen takes. So we're now like 5 moves in, and I blundered a knight. Amazing stuff. A large part of the Caro-Kann, one of the main lines, is the advanced variation, and you try and go after this pawn here. And you have to keep in mind that this pawn is defended by the queen. It's pretty horrendous that I immediately forgot that this pawn was defended by the queen. I guess I thought the king and the queen were flipped or something. Alright, so I'm already losing. The evaluation is +4 for white, because not only am I down a piece, I'm also down in development. So I play queen check, because I'm like, maybe white will not play this move, and I can get some development back. And white does not end up playing that move. Alright, cool, good stuff. F6. Obviously, F6 allows an attack against my king. It also hangs this pawn because queen takes, the knight's no longer pinned. So, and white gets to trade queens. And you might be thinking, isn't the knight hanging at the end of that? And the answer is that if you take, there's this fork. So, kind of, you do get the rook at the end of it. And maybe you can save your knight with this maneuver here, bishop here, and then rescuing the knight out this way. Doesn't matter. F6 blocks the knight from developing. I think that's the bad part with this move. So white plays bishop check, fairly logical move, and king over because, this just hangs the bishop, and genuinely, what else am I gonna do? Top engine move is queen takes bishop. So I move over, queen takes d5, check. If there's ever a position that's resignable in chess, which there's not, but if there's ever a position that's resignable, it's this, You're down a ton of material, you're down in development, you can't develop these pieces, your king is actively getting harassed and has no pawn shelter at all. You're about to get checkmated. This, I would not blame someone for resigning this position. But, knight back, attacking the queen. Queen over, because what am I going to do? Bishop check, tremendous move. E5, yes, I'm getting my development going, Bishop all the way back, okay, I don't know about that one. I think, bishop here was better. Honestly, even, bishop takes pawn. Or long castle is just completely ignoring everything because my king is so open that you can just sacrifice this piece, sacrifice it like that, and you're probably just going to checkmate me. Practically speaking, I think that bishop here is an outstanding move because it sets up this discovered attack on my queen and it unpins the knight, but that's also fine. Knight out, developing with tempo, very good. White can pin the knight like this, but I'm not going to complain about queen f3. h5, pawn attacking my queen, queen going back, and castles, a very good move. So getting out of the opening, I still have my queen in danger, even though white has not been attacking it recently. I'm still down a full piece. I see now what the idea of h5 was. It was so I could develop this bishop with tempo. Let's go. Queen over, losing a little bit of advantage. Knight f5 is a good move. Rook over, developing with tempo, always good. Knight here blunders 2 pieces at the same exact time. Now there's a fork. Queen over. It doesn't defend the bishop, but nice try. Maybe I won't want to trade queens, but I do. Queen takes. So in this position, actually white does go f3 and tries to trap my bishop. But so here's why it doesn't work, right? Bishop check first, because f3 does open this diagonal. King over. unless white wants to play rook f2, which actually, now that I'm thinking about it, is not the worst move ever. Like, if I take, my bishop might actually be trapped. I can actually play h4, threatening to get my bishop out of danger this way. And you might be thinking, well, can't white just take? And the answer is, after white takes, I sacrifice the knight! And then after pawn takes, this is checkmate! Because the bishop blocks this square. So that's pretty insane that there's just a checkmate on the board. Also, I don't have to play h4, I can play like anything, because even if I play something kind of ridiculous looking like a5, white still can't take the bishop because of the same exact idea. Check, and then pawn takes, and then rook takes, checkmate. At this point, white has two other options than to play king h1, and for one, white can go one of these two pieces over here, and let's say the knight, for example. In that case, I have knight takes, threatening this discovered attack, and the problem with this is after he would block with the rook, now I can bring my bishop back, so that's why knight takes is not the best approach. And the other approach, which is rook f2, which we talked about earlier, leads into a pretty long engine line. Essentially, what it wants me to do is go rook d8 threatening checkmate, rook f1 best moves to sidestep out of it, after which point I do takes takes, and then I have this pretty crazy move, like rook c5, counterattacking the knight, and yeah, it's crazy because after pawn takes bishop, it threatens my knight. So now it wants me to take and then lose this knight, and you might be thinking, what the heck? So you did end up just losing the piece. Not so fast, because then I have bishop takes c2 check, and then like king escapes somewhere, and then I have this move, pinning the bishop to the rook, and there's no checks with the bishop to get out of it. So essentially I'm in this endgame where I'm up the exchange and I have this bishop pinned and I'm probably going to win it. So it's really complicated, but that's essentially the idea. All of this to say that this bishop is not as trapped as you might think it is. So instead of doing all of that, smart stuff, I instead go, okay, maybe I can go for something here. And yeah, that's hanging the knight to two different pieces. But I was like, I'm losing my bishop anyway. Maybe I can kind of like troll my opponent or something. It does open up the path for the bishop to go back, so I'm choosing to lose the knight instead of the bishop, which is wrong. Okay, so he plays knight takes, and obviously I'm going to bring my bishop back, right? Or like bishop e6 probably, because that was the whole point of sacrificing this knight here, is that it opens up this. I do counterattack this pawn though, Good stuff. Okay, so I've now lost the bishop again. Cool. e4. If f takes, like, this is defended so many times, so I don't really understand the point of this. But he moves the knight back, counterattacking my rook. There's like one of these two moves now defending the pawn, but okay, pinning, let's go. And he defends it, and I'm like, you know what? I know that I can't pin it to win it, but I can try. This knight is always going to be defended by the pawn. And also, like, white can defend this, like, 100 million bajillion times. But even if white cannot defend this knight, the most I'm doing is, like, bishop takes, pawn takes, rook takes, and I win the pawn. So, it's not a good plan, but it is a plan. Okay, and I don't see it. And then he doesn't see it. Let's go. Knight e6 would have just, like, ended the game, because it's not that it forks my king and my rook, because if he does that, something like this, and then he takes the rook with the knight, now I take the bishop with my bishop, and I get two pieces for the rook, which is not as good as, just taking this way. So I managed to blunder another piece. He doesn't see it, and he instead defends this pawn, which was not under attack, and it really can't be under attack because, And I go ahead and take this free pawn, which does kind of X-ray attack this. Maybe I can get a discovered attack on the rook, even though I'm losing my own rook. But it's fine. Check! Forking my king and my bishop. Fantastically done. As you remember, I am now discover attacking this rook, and he now counterattacks my rook. So if I take this rook, he's now going to take my rook. Except at the end of it, I have bishop takes bishop check, so I would be winning a bishop there. So that just loses the rook. I mean, it loses the exchange, not the full rook for nothing. I saved my rook. Honestly, very impressive. I wouldn't have expected something like that. Rook's on the second rank. Even though I can't go here, it is a pretty solid space for the rook to be on. It is the top engine move, so... h3. I should now take this pawn, because if I don't, then I'm losing my pawn. But instead, I throw in this kind of Zwischenzug, trying to, I guess, dislodge the bishop from here. Okay, check. Alright. And he goes this way. Cool. And takes, attacking the bishop again. And I'm now up like a substantial amount of material somehow. Okay. And now I'm going to be up another pawn. Cool. Oh! Okay, so he noticed that I was chasing around his bishop for the past, like, 5 or 6 moves. And then he's like, alright, you know, you could have it. Maybe he's like, because the bishop defends the rook defends the bishop also. That's not how it works, but, you know, cool. Check, because, of course, king up. Oh, wow. Maybe he thought because his pawns are going this way, my pawns are also going this way. So that's a free pawn. Except it's not a free pawn. And then he resigns, which I think that's a terrible move. Like, has he not been seeing how I've been playing this game? I'm only up 2 rooks and 3 pawns, you know? Like, I don't think I would have been able to win this game, honestly. I probably would have, like, blundered both of my rooks, blundered all of my pawns, and then allowed him to queen. And then he would have blundered his queen. That's how I think this game would have gone. Okay, so it is time for the ELO reveal. Drum roll, please. At the time that that game was played, I was rated 1165, and my opponent was rated 1131. So just know, like, if you're under 1,000, you're struggling, you're making bad moves over and over again, you're just blundering over and over again, you're like, ugh, I'm so stupid, and my opponents are also so stupid, how am I losing to these people? Just know it never gets any better. But also, there is hope, because, like, if you're sub 1,000, and you ran into me at that very second where I played that game, you probably would have beaten me pretty easily. So remember, you can beat people who are better at chess than you are by not blundering and by not resigning. So never blunder and never resign. Thanks for watching.